This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to a new season of the award-winning Adventures in Compliance, the podcast where we look at the Sherlock Holmes short stories, movies, novels, and related material from the angle of compliance. The Casebook of Sherlock Holmes is the final set of 12 out of a total of 56 Sherlock Holmes short stories published by Arthur Conan Doyle. These were published, of course, in the Strand magazine between October 1921 and April 1927. The books, are two of the short stories, The Adventure of the Veiled Lodger and The Old Shuscombe Old Place, were the last of the Sherlock Holmes works protected by copyright. Although some of the stories are comparable with earlier works, many people feel that this is a lesser offering of Holmes, to which I wholeheartedly disagree. I hope that you will join us for this exploration, the final collected works of Sherlock Holmes, as we take a deep dive literally into business ethics, leadership, investigative strategies, pattern recognition, and perhaps even portending the use of AI and generative AI as a tool for the compliance professional. There are some great stories in here, and I know you will enjoy them. And I hope you will enjoy this season of Adventures in Compliance really as much as I've enjoyed reading the stories. Today, we're going to take up one of the least known of the 56 A. Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes short stories. And today, we're going to take a look at The Adventure of the Blanched Soldier. The story has some really interesting lessons for compliance and business ethics. We're going to have a quick word from our network sponsor, Ethico, then we'll be right back.
If you're a compliance officer, middle managers are crucial in getting your programs from you to your frontline employees. But how do we activate those managers and get them on our side? Ethico's new Middle Manager Toolkit equips you with the skills needed to empower your managers, to promote a culture where ethical behavior thrives and employees feel empowered to speak up. Learn how to turn frontline managers into ethical leaders with our new white paper, Empowering Middle Managers as Ethics Champions. And did I mention you can get the whole toolkit for free? Head to ethico.com to download the full toolkit today.
And now, The Adventure of the Blanched Soldier. The Adventure of the Blanched Soldier was published in October of 1926. It's set in the immediate aftermath of the Boer War, and the story begins with what appears to be a simple missing persons case. James Dodd, once of the Imperial Yeomanry, is anxious to trace a friend and fellow soldier, Geoffrey Emsworth. Letters to his family elicited only a terse and seemingly unwilling explanation that Emsworth has set off to travel the world. But Dodd has his doubts. A visit to old Colonel Emsworth only makes him more uneasy, especially after one of the servants seemed to speak of Geoffrey in the past tense. Dodd asked if this meant his friend was dead, and the butler said no, but he might have been better off if he were. Up that night in his bedroom, Dodd saw Geoffrey at the windows. In the next day, he was essentially driven away by the colonel, but he caught one final clue before he departed, a man walking away from an apparently deserted outbuilding and a second man within. That, he seemed certain, was his friend Geoffrey. Yet stranger and stranger, of course, Sherlock Holmes has his own theories, although the manner in which he explains them does seem to run absolutely contrary to what we have learned in the past. Why, he asks, would any family member shut one of their own up? If you're Jeffro Ruskow, late of the Copper Breeches, it would seem to be to keep your daughter from a very persistent fiancé. If you're Culverton Smith, in the case of the dying detective, it is because you infected your son with a deadly Asian disease. If you are, and so forth. Yet no sinister machinations are at work here. Silly ones maybe, but sinister no. Young Geoffrey is suffering from leprosy, and his family are too embarrassed to tell anyone. Holmes, on the other hand, knows exactly what to do. With him to the Emsworth estate, travels the world-renowned dermatologist Sir James Saunders, who's able to put everyone's mind at rest by explaining that the boy merely has ichthyosis, an easily treated skin condition that only looks and feels like leprosy. He'll be right as rain in no time. And now, some business ethics lessons from the adventure of the Blanched Soldier. This story is unique in many ways. First of all, it's narrated by Holmes himself, which allows the story to offer an intimate look at his methods and principles. Yet beneath the narrative lies a treasure trove of lessons for the modern compliance professional, particularly in the area of business ethics. This tale revolves around themes of trust, transparency, and the consequences of concealment, issues that resonate deeply in the corporate world today. For compliance professionals, this story is more than an engaging mystery. It's a masterclass in ethical decision-making. I'm going to take a look at 5 key takeaways from the adventure of the Blanched Soldier and apply them to building and sustaining a culture of compliance. Number 1, the perils of concealment. The central conflict in the story arises from the Emsworth's family decision to hide Jeffrey Emsworth's condition. Fearful of the stigma attached with the diagnosis of leprosy, which of course turns out later to be incorrect, the family chooses secrecy over openness. The decision leads to misunderstandings, emotional distress, and a cascade of unintended consequences. For the corporate leader, the lesson is clear. Secrecy can be far more damaging than transparency. Concealing critical information, whether it's a compliance breach, a defective product, or an unethical practice, inevitably leads to greater harm when the truth is revealed. Transparency is the cornerstone of ethical business practices, and organizations must foster a culture where employees feel empowered to raise concerns and report misconduct without fear of retaliation. When issues arise, addressing them openly and honestly is not only the ethical choice, but often the most pragmatic one. Cover-ups, as history has repeatedly shown, rarely succeed and frequently exacerbate the original problem. 2, the duty of care and compassion. Despite the family's misguided secrecy, their actions stem from a place of care. They seek to protect Jeffrey from public scrutiny, even as their approach isolates him further. This tension between compassion and poor decision-making offers an important ethical lesson. In the corporate world, a duty of care is more than a legal obligation, it's an ethical imperative. Whether it involves ensuring employee safety, addressing concerns raised by whistleblowers, or handling compliance investigations, organizations must act with compassion and fairness. For the compliance professional, ethical leadership requires the balancing of organizational interests with the well-being of employees and stakeholders. When addressing sensitive issues such as workplace harassment or discrimination, leaders should prioritize humanity. A compassionate approach not only resolves problems more effectively, but strengthens loyalty and trust within an organization. 3, addressing misdiagnoses and misinterpretations. The Emsworth family actions are driven only by a belief that Godfrey's condition is both contagious and socially ruinous. This assumption, rooted in misinformation, leads him to isolate Godfrey unnecessarily. When Holmes investigates, he uncovers the truth. Godfrey does not have leprosy, and the family's fears were unfolded. The element of this story serves as a cautionary tale for compliance professionals. Acting on incomplete or incorrect information can lead to poor decisions that harm individuals and your organization. Every compliance professional knows that thorough due diligence is essential in every aspect of corporate compliance, from investigating misconduct to assessing third-party risks. Jumping to conclusions without a full understanding can have significant consequences. A robust compliance program includes protocols for gathering and analyzing information, objectively ensuring the decisions are based on evidence rather than assumptions. 4, the importance of independent oversight. Sherlock Holmes' role in the story highlights the value of an independent investigation. As an outsider, Holmes is able to approach the case without biases or, indeed, emotional entanglements of the Emsworth family. His objectivity allows him to uncover the truth and bring resolution to a situation that has spiraled out of control. For organizations, independent oversight is critical to maintaining ethical integrity. Whether it's an internal audit, a third-party investigation, or the work of the compliance function itself, objectivity is the key to addressing problems effectively. For the compliance professional, a well-structured compliance program includes mechanisms for independent review and oversight. This could involve engaging external auditors, conducting regular risk assessments, or empowering compliance teams to operate autonomously. Independence ensures investigations are fair, thorough, and free from influence. 5. By the story's end, the Emsworth family has had the opportunity to repair their relations and reintegrate Jeffrey into society. While their initial actions caused harm, the truth provides a path towards healing and rebuilding trust. In the corporate context, mistakes are inevitable. What matters is how an organization responds. Ethical lapses, compliance breaches, or even public scandals do not have to define a company's legacy. With transparency, accountability, and a commitment to improvement, organizations can recover and rebuild trust. For the compliance professional, when a compliance failure occurs, the response should include a root cause analysis, corrective actions, and clear communications with stakeholders. But demonstrating accountability and proactive steps to prevent future issues are essential to restoring credibility. A well-handled response can turn a crisis into an opportunity to reinforce the organization's commitment to ethical practices. What are the practical takeaways? Number 1, prioritize transparency. Open communication build trust and minimize risks associated with secrecy. 2, act with compassion. Ethical leadership requires a balancing of business needs with the well-being of employees and stakeholders. 3, ensure thorough investigations. Avoid hasty decisions by gathering and analyzing all relevant evidence. 4, emphasize independence by having an independent oversight. And 5, commitment to continuous improvement. Learn from your mistakes and use them as opportunities to build your organizational culture. The Adventure of the Blanched Soldier may be a work of fiction, but its lessons are deeply relevant to the real-world challenges faced by the 21st century compliance professional. Secrecy, fear, and information often create ethical dilemmas, which require thoughtful, transparent, and compassionate responses. By embracing the principles illustrated in this story, compliance leaders can build programs that foster trust, accountability, and a culture of integrity. As Holmes himself demonstrates, the pursuit of truth is not just a professional obligation, it's an ethical imperative. I hope you've enjoyed this episode from the final collected work of A. Conan Doyle on Sherlock Holmes, Casebook of Sherlock Holmes. As I mentioned at the start of this podcast, the sponsor of the entire Compliance Podcast Network is Ethico. So check out their free offer in the show notes, the Middle Manager's Toolkit. I know you will find it incredibly useful as a part of your compliance toolkit going forward. If you are a Sherlock Holmes fan, aficionado, or maven, and you'd like to discuss an episode, a book, a short story, or a movie with me, I hope you'll reach out to me. I would love to visit with you. As from this podcast series, I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes fan, and I love talking to other Holmesians and Holmes-Lockians as well. The award-winning podcast Adventures in Compliance is a special production of the Compliance Podcast Network. Have you ever thought about starting a podcast? Would you like to start a podcast? In 2025, I think it would be a great time for you to start a podcast, and you can post it on the Compliance Podcast Network, the only podcast network in compliance and by far one of the most popular B2B podcast network around. So if you'd like more information on starting a podcast, please give me a shout. You can reach me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. I hope you'll join us again next time where we take up the adventure of the lion's mane.